first of all, welcome and thank you for everybody who has who's decided to join our little webinar and session today about demystifying transformation. I'm your host and moderator, Paul Curtis, with Thoughtworks. I'm an executive partner and lead of our Google Cloud practice in North America. Just a little bit about me. I've been at Thoughtworks for a little under 2 years, former developer, engineer, architect, former CTO and CISO, and I'm referred to as what some would call a strategic pathfinder, so helping organizations tread new paths, cut paths through the jungles of change and transformation, and ultimately leave a trail of breadcrumbs for others to follow in that stead. Very happy that we have with us today several experts in digital transformation, and honestly, three of my favorite people in the world. So without further ado, let's introduce Rick Kick and Ajay Chankramath from Thoughtworks and Bobby Allen from Google. Rick, would you like to go ahead and kick off with intros?
Sure. I'm Rick Kick. Thanks everybody for joining. I am responsible for application and platform transformation inside of Thoughtworks. So as you look at your overall cloud transformation and application migration, my role is to really take the top half of your app stack, and then I'll hand it over to my partner, Ajay, who handles the other half.
Thank you, Rick, and thanks everybody for joining today. So as Rick mentioned, I focus on building the scaffolding needed for migrating to the cloud and delivering products on the cloud. So irrespective of the cloud provider or journey, we all know that that is a part that everybody has to go through. And what we see is that when we work with our transformational clients, the cloud is an integral part of that journey, irrespective of whether you're, whatever the maturity level of your business is. So that's where I come in, and I try and help our clients get to the cloud or operate efficiently on the cloud. Over to you, Bobby.
Thanks, Ajay. I'm Bobby Allen. I'm with Google Cloud. I've been there about 1.5 years now. And I'm officially a group product manager in our app eco space. And what that means is I help folks with containers, serverless, dev tools, CI/CD, hybrid and multi-cloud. If you look me up on LinkedIn, you'll see I call myself a cloud therapist. I made up my own title to acknowledge that we're making up a lot of stuff when it comes to cloud. We're winging it and figuring some things out as we go. So I just want to be honest about the fact that I'm there to listen and I haven't figured everything out. Really happy to talk with Paul and the other panelists today, and hopefully you can learn from some of the things we've seen along the way.
Excellent. Thank you for the intros. And I love Bobby's kind of very, very candid demeanor here. So let's set a few expectations for what we're going to talk about today. First of all, I truly hope that you all have a wonderful and kind of interactive and to some degree, a bit of a humorous experience, right? Some of what we're going to talk about today really is born through our collective experiences doing this with customers, right? This is less academic, less theoretical, more practical and pragmatic lessons we've learned in actually doing large scale digital transformations with large organizations. So again, the title of this session is Demystifying Transformation, How to Do Large Scale Enterprise Modernization Successfully on the Cloud. Just very quickly as a housekeeping item, for those of you who wish to post questions, you can do so either in the Q&A feature within Zoom, or you can go ahead and drop your questions into the webinar chat. Please make sure that the host and panelists option is selected in the to field in your webinar chat, so we can make sure to view and respond to your questions as quickly as we can, given the time allotted. So thank you very much. Appreciate that, everybody. And we will go ahead and begin diving into our content here. So how to start your transformation journey. These are the topics that we're going to cover. Given the limited time that we have, and honestly, how passionate the panelists of speakers are here, we could talk about this probably for several hours, and we're going to try to keep it summarized and concise for you all. I know that many of you on the call certainly read industry publications. We're all generally fans of analyst writings and publications as well. But the thing I want to put in front of you, kind of setting the stage for what we're going to talk about, is that many times what analysts put out there are backward looking, right? So if you think about this kind of a driving analogy, what you see from the analyst is talking about trends that have already happened, lessons that have already happened in the past from those clients. It's kind of like looking through the rear view mirror. And the perspective and the insights we want to give to you all is really that windshield experience, right? We want to help you forecast and see what's coming at you in the different situations you may find yourself in, whether you're part of a consultancy, whether you're doing this inside of your own organization. So that said, the topics on the screen are what we're going to go through. And in the spirit of, again, trying to be very interactive with you all as much as we're able, we're going to go ahead and start with a quick poll just to get a kind of a heartbeat of where you all are in your cloud journey, and more specifically, where you all are in your process of actually undergoing transformation. So we'll go ahead and put our first poll up. Hannah, if you would. All right, so where are you in your cloud journey? We'll take about 30 seconds for you all to weigh in there. That said, let's open it up to the panelists very quickly and just ask a quick question. Based upon your experience working with clients and customers, where do you generally see the organizations you're working with in their cloud journey? Like, where are they on that maturity scale, if you will?
Well, one of the things that we talked about that Bobby had said in one of our earlier conversations that I think is really important is it doesn't really matter where you are. If you have yet to start or you're in the early stages, it's really important to understand that while there are other companies that have been in the cloud maybe longer than you have, the question is whether or not they're doing cloud right. So as long as you actually start off on the right foot and are doing cloud right, your ability to actually catch up and even pass some of those people that have already been in the cloud for a while is actually much greater than you probably believe. And I think that's a really important message that Bobby was sharing with us.
Excellent. Thank you, Rick. That's I think that's very true insight. I think that's all of our collective experience. So the results of the poll are in, and very interesting to see at the lead of 50%, we're on the cloud and we're not sure if we're on the right track. So good news and bad news here. The bad news is that that is the story of a lot of organizations, right? This is unfortunately not unique. The good news is that's the story of a lot of organizations, and it's not unique. So feel like you're in good company, right? You don't have to struggle through this alone. So wonderful. And we'll go ahead and actually dive into the first topic at depth. So starting that transformation journey, having a clear vision and a value hypothesis is oftentimes the first place to start. You might even think of this as a North Star, right? The guiding vision as to where organizations want to head, and ultimately kind of deciding on that destination. So to lead us off here, Rick, would you go ahead and talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, this is one of those things that I'm really passionate about. If you look at the people who joined the call, we look at cloud as a solution, but yet probably each and every one of us has a different problem we've been trying to solve with cloud as the solution. So being able to articulate inside of your business and with your leadership why you've actually decided to migrate to the cloud and codify that in a very, very clear mission statement is really important. And the reason why is as you're on that cloud journey, as 50% of you are, you're going to hit a lot of junction points and decision points to make. And should I go this way? Should I go that way? Should we do X? Should we do Y? The reason that you have to hit those decision points is because the cloud transformation path is unclear, right? You're going to hit these junction points. How you know whether or not you're making the correct decision to go left or right is going to be based on whether or not that decision is going to get you to that original vision and destination in that North Star. If you don't have that North Star, any path you take is going to get you somewhere. It just might not be where you want to go. So making sure that you understand your why. Why am I joining the cloud? Why am I doing this migration? Why am I making this investment? And then at every junction point, ask yourself, is this decision going to get me closer to that North Star? If not, you should probably look at a different path.
Yeah, if I may add to that, what Rick just mentioned, right? So basically moving to the cloud has to be based on what you need, not like what somebody else needs or what you read somewhere else. So that is the real critical takeaway there, right? Then you also have to think about like, where do you start from and what are you really trying to achieve for your business? So that has to be that clarity and vision that you need to have that'll drive the whole journey forward. It's also going to be a strategy based on the life cycle of your products. And we'll get into this in a lot more detail down the road. But if you know where your product maturity is, what you're really trying to sell, what you're really trying to make your business out of, that has to be a part of your cloud journey and your thinking around your vision around that. If it's not, there's going to be definitely challenges with respect to some of those things not aligning correctly. The other thing to think about is that your investment levels for whatever products that you're doing could vary. So this is not all or nothing kind of thing. And depending on your whole portfolio, you might actually have different kinds of investments that you would have to do there. So your vision has to sort of support that.
Yeah, Paul, I'll piggyback on some things that Ajay and Rick shared. I think it's important that this focus on value, not on cost, because oftentimes in cloud, we talk about cost first, but cost is usually a proxy for value, meaning we want to talk about the cost of something going down, but cloud is really about raising the value ceiling, not just lowering the cost bottom. And so one of the things that I think that happens a lot of times is we don't have enough conversations around what we think is going to happen, around expectations. So bad expectations often sink more projects, I've said in the past, than bad code and broken APIs. We don't talk enough in an organization. And so I want to give the audience 3 questions that may help them start to have the right kind of conversations. 1, what does better mean to us? And acknowledge that you probably will not all be on the same page. 2, what are we willing and able to change? And 3, what do we think will happen if we do X? And the reason that ties back to value versus cost is kind of simply this. Knowing the cost of something requires calculation. Knowing the value of something requires conversation. How much does it cost versus how much do we care? And those are very nuanced. And sometimes we're running too much to products and tools, but those don't substitute for having conversations in the organization for what is important to us and how do we add more value to our business and to our customers ultimately.
Excellent points. Definitely appreciate the insight there. As I promised from the beginning, this is why I think this is probably going to be a very interesting session for the audience in attendance, because again, this is real life feedback. This is real life situations that our panelists have gone through to arrive at these conclusions. So please, audience members, feel free to drop questions in the webinar chat or the Q&A. We'll try to address those as they arise. But let's go ahead and move on to our next poll. Hopefully you all found that useful. But our next poll, moving on. So where do you sit within your organization? And we're kind of painting a guided path here for our conversation as well. So these aren't just arbitrary questions. We do in fact have a plan here. All right, so while we're waiting for the poll, Bobby, in your experience, where do you typically see, I think, kind of the breakdown or stalling of change initiatives within an organization? At what level? Is it really executive? Is it really kind of middle management, kind of that bridge between folks in the field and those who are interfacing with executive? Or do you kind of see dissension within the actual delivery arms or implementation arms?
Yeah, I will say honestly, I've seen all of the above, depending on the organization. I mean, I think transformation, and again, I call myself a cloud therapist partly because a lot of what therapists do is put people together who should talk but don't. And in many of our organizations, we are not talking up and down and across the organization. And so sometimes leadership is painting a vision that should have been informed by things on the bottom and vice versa. We're just not talking. And so we are not failing for lack of tooling, we're failing for lack of planning and lack of conversations and discussions around expectations. So I'll say that it's all over the place, but what often happens as well, Paul, is we are not realistic around what we can actually tackle right now, right? Our, old school, if my grandmother was on the call, she said, baby, sometimes your eyes are bigger than your stomach. Sometimes we want to eat more than we really have an appetite or a palate to put down. And so we're going after all of these things that sound good, but really can't be assimilated or processed by the organization. So don't just go for what sounds good on paper, go for what you can do without leaving dead bodies in your wake.
I mean, just to piggyback on what Bobby said, and he put it so eloquently there. So one of the things that we tend to see there is that sometimes every level of your organization has to be perfectly aligned, and we know that that never happens, right? In no organization that any of us have worked in, that never happens. So how do you actually make this work? So it's a question of every part of the organization supporting every other parts of the organization. So we sometimes feel that it is an executive decision. or it's the decision of a technology team, or it's the decision of a business team. No, it is a decision of everybody together. So primarily those three components that we see there, your business ultimately has to be completely behind that, and that has to be well supported by your technology team. And also it has to be aligned with your financial side of things. So once those three alignment comes together, then it becomes a lot more easier journey.
And Paul, I'll chime in there that one of the tools that we like to employ is to uncover some of those potential areas of friction and resistance is we just do a pre-mortem, right? Let's look at this project, this cloud transformation we're about to go on, and from the executives down to the people who have to implement it, let's ideate on 18 months from now, this has been a horrific failure. Why has it failed? And you just start to uncover all of those fears that people think they might run into. And then you start to put together remediation plans and risk mitigation strategies around each of those elements to uncover those rocks before you hit them.
Beautiful. So the results of our poll are in, and I do want to connect a couple dots here. So Bobby just talked about doing things in a way where you don't leave dead bodies on the field. And Rick just brought that together by saying you need to basically assess how you avoid a situation where you're leaving dead bodies on the field. So hopefully that's a little.
We're not fans of dead bodies.
No, not fans of dead bodies. We would like to prevent that if at all possible. We like successful, long, teams with longevity. So the results of our polls are in. Very interesting to see and not expected at all that 50% of the folks polled said they mainly help with to influence decisions. 25% said they're the actual decision maker, and another 25% say that they mainly execute on the decisions. And I think this is actually a very good reflections of commonly what we see inside of organizations. It is in fact this mix, and it is in fact actually the influencers that typically have honestly the greatest burden inside of organizations to actually get things done. So very interesting. So we'll go ahead and move on to the second point here. And this is around having a coherent, and I also want to add, having a coherent and cohesive transformation strategy. So to kick off this topic, Bobby, would you go ahead and lead this discussion?
Yeah. Just a quick segue back to the prior point, Paul. I think sometimes we start with textbooks and computers, and sometimes we need to start with therapy couches. There's a lot of good advanced stuff that happened before we ever showed up. And sometimes people almost have seriously a level of PTSD from other transformation projects that went south. So we need to be empathetic about that when we show up, there's history before you got there, and we need to listen. Speaking of kind of trauma, I want to tap into some of my own experience here and give you an analogy or a construct for how we think about managing this in your organization. So I'm married to a real estate broker. I think I'm in my 8th house since 2002. We've moved a whole lot. And part of what happens is when you're a homeowner, there are at least 3 different things you can do to change your real estate future. You can remodel with a contractor, you can refinance with a real estate or with a mortgage broker, or you can relocate with a real estate broker. All 3 of those people have different agendas and different data points. Do I need to knock down this wall and expand the kitchen? Do I need to refinance the debt, or do I need to just go to a different address? And the problem is that those 3 professionals don't talk to each other. What we really need is a clearinghouse, Paul, where I can have a set of plans and a set of expectations, and the data points from those 3 individuals inform that, but I may need an advisor to help me understand what to do. Now, I'll also say this. It's often not just about which one I do, but which one I do first or which one I do now. Again, those of us who've been homeowners for a while know that you may move and then refinance, or remodel and then relocate, as I've done multiple times. So it's a progression of things. And so it's big on, we need to understand, one, don't be driven by FOMO. Just because everyone else is moving doesn't mean it's time for you to move. There are different seasons of life for houses. There are different seasons of life for transformation. And so again, final thing, as decision makers for transformation, you're not just a homeowner, you're responsible for a whole neighborhood or street. And different families need different things. This family is ready to downsize because the kids have moved out. This family just needs to make the kitchen a little bit bigger versus another one that needs to remodel the bathroom. So think about what is the right or appropriate treatment for that application or that team, and try to give them what they need for that part of the journey and the season that they're in.
And if I may piggyback on what Bobby was saying, he put it so eloquently there. There is a reason why we call this a journey, right? Because this is not something where you would just go in there, get it done, and get it over with. So essentially, when we look at our clients, we basically say there are very few people who are completely done with their journey, with their transformation journey. Why is that so? I think this is fairly obvious if you look at some of the examples that Bobby gave, right? These things actually are, any kind of transformation goals are tied to your business goals. And when your business goals change, you see that your initiative continues to grow and continues to actually build upon the previous decisions that you have made. So it's highly unlikely that even if you actually start talking about, okay, my transformation project is done, your actual transformation is not done. That actually continues to be there. And that's where the coherency of your transformation strategy matters. Because if you don't have a strategy that is going to support a long-term play for this, you're going to be very, very successful in your lift and shift or your transformation, but then your adoption and your business value, which is what we have been talking about several times already, that business value realization is where you're going to have a lot of challenges. So that's where the strategy becomes so important.
Yeah, and I'll add to that last part that Bobby had said is that every house on the street has a different objective, right? That goes back to that first point of knowing your why. Everybody has a different reason for going on this journey. Everyone has a different set of constraints to go on this journey that is unique to your business, and you need to get that out and instead have open, honest conversations around what those constraints are and what it is you're trying to achieve. One of the things that I think is also really important, a part as that transformation strategy is, as you start to go on that journey, don't wait for every single light to turn green before you leave your house, right? You need to leave as soon as you know that you can reach that first major milestone. So as you're writing out that transformation strategy, just look at what that first major milestone is. What value will you be creating for your business, and how are you going to fund that work? Don't look at the entire multi-year transformation journey and try to put together a 3-year plan. Don't try to budget the entire thing. There are too many unknowns on this journey for you to be accurate in the first place. So take somewhat of an agile mindset to this transformation journey, have coherent chunks of deliberate work that you're going to create, but then ideate, get some fast feedback loops, move on to the next milestone, move on to the next milestone, and validate that you actually are seeing that value per milestone before you make the next one. Don't try to budget the whole thing up front or you'll never start.
Outstanding points. First of all, I want to say thank you for those chipping in on the Q&A and in the chat. I love the fact that so far we've gotten really good feedback, and folks are apparently very, very happy with Bobby's analogies. The promise I said earlier in the call that this was going to be, I think, a fun session. Just get ready. I hope for those of you who may not have access to the recording later, you're writing these down. I think all the panelists are okay if you take their analogies and use them in your executive briefings and your boardrooms. Nobody's going to come at you for royalties on these nuggets. So very, very excellent. Appreciate the candid nature of the discussion. Let's move on very quickly to our next poll and then our next point. So our next poll here, what was the driver for your cloud journey? And I expect there to be a variety of answers here. I would, Rick, I'd like to give you a chance to just give some commentary here. As we were prepping for this session a few days ago, one of the things Rick mentioned is that it's probably not an acceptable answer if you're on your cloud journey because your friends are also on the cloud journey. So let's start there.
Yeah, there are multiple right answers, but there are wrong answers to start your cloud transformation. And because your friends are doing it, or all the cool kids are doing it, or I see cool companies doing it, that's not the right answer, right? We've with all of our clients that we've seen, there's lots of different right reasons to start your cloud transformation. Just make sure that for your business that you are looking to either create customer and or business value, and you can articulate what that value is. If you can't, then it's going to start to look like a technical exercise, and the likelihood of funding to be pulled, the likelihood of disenfranchising your workforce is high. right? Make sure that you understand and can articulate what that why is.
And I think that's a great point, Rick. Right? I mean, because one thing that we tend to see is that there are a lot of wrong reasons as to why people actually do this. We see that in reality today, right? I mean, so because some people do it for cost, and some people do it for performance, and for some people do it just coming out of an M&A. Now you acquired a company, and then that company has a cloud presence, and you basically are trying to piggyback on that. So you have to really look at this holistically and come up with a real reason as to why you want to do it. And let's not kid ourselves, right? That is because if you start doing that, then you're going to get caught at some point. So you have to be really, really truthful to yourself with respect to why you want to do it, and then that how becomes a lot more easier.
I think Ajay and Rick touched on the fact that, and we've all touched on the fact that there are different journeys or seasons that you're on. Some of it is, as we look at what's happening in the industry, Paul, we can learn what to do and what not to do. And sometimes we see other things that have happened and gone badly. I don't need to burn my hand if I saw you touch the stove and fry your hand up like bacon. I can learn from that and not hit the same landmines ideally. So sometimes we've seen people that lifted and shifted and thought they were going to save money. Well, that went badly. So why do I think that if I do that, it's going to be any different? So we do need to be nimble. We need to be agile. We need to learn from the things that happened before. So we're not arrogantly charging in to say, well, we're going to do it differently because we can manage a VM better than a cloud provider who does this at super duper scale. Maybe there are bigger things to solve than just the cost of a VM, for example.
100% agree. And again, this narrative, this conversation, pulling from the collective experience of expert panelists, I think it's important that in all of this, right, as we're thinking about the overarching narrative around cloud and transformation, for organizations, it is vitally important, honestly, that organizations learn from each other's mistakes as opposed to really only looking internally to the mistakes of the past internally and in isolation. So great place for the analysts to come in. Also a great place to really think about partners who begin touching many different organizations and have the collective aggregate experience of doing transformation in many of those organizations and can help you navigate and hopefully circumvent those landmines Bobby was talking about.
Paul, if I could add a minor point, and I hope this,
Sure.
I don't know if this is going to be good or bad for the audience. So I work at a cloud provider, Google, some pretty smart people that are there. And if you all saw the types of questions that we ask each other, you might be, I don't know, shocked or surprised in some ways, but it is really hard, I would say impossible, to master all of this cloud thing. And so someone who's an expert in this part of cloud is collaborating with someone else. We are constantly sharing knowledge, even at a cloud provider, on how to align product and strategy and the right size roadmaps and all that. It is not fair to your people to expect that one person can be a master of all of it. It's just not possible. And then even if they are, that they can continue that mastery over an extended period of time. It's okay for people to raise their hand, or it should be, to say that we don't know, we don't have all the answers, and to collaborate with other people to iterate on some of these ideas, as I believe Rick talked about earlier.
Excellent points again. So the results of our poll are in for the drivers for your cloud journey. Really interesting to see, of course, that several of the questions and responses were catering really to kind of the financial drivers for moving to cloud, but a pretty good split here. So 40% of you said that your journey to cloud was really based on wanting to improve revenues by scaling up on demand. Another 40% wanted to reduce operating costs, no surprise there. And 20% wanted to take advantage of the standardized cloud native services. All fantastic reasons. So definitely appreciate the variety and diversity of reasons out there. And as far as the financial motivations to go to cloud, I think this is actually one of the good things about our next upcoming topic where Ajay is going to lead, and especially around the financial piece. One of the great reasons why I hope that all of you or most of you are considering FinOps and building FinOps practices inside of your organizations to really help speak to this and manage this and be strategic about your thinking of adoption of cloud and adoption of digital transformation initiatives, as opposed to just being in tactical and trying to put out the fires. All right, so for our next topic here, product versus program thinking. Ajay, you're up, buddy.
Thank you, Paul. So again, this is an area that we keep emphasizing to everybody we talk to, because as we mentioned earlier, a lot of our clients that when we actually first talk to them, they won't actually put together a program to actually get from where they are today. Sometimes they are on-prem, they're on some other providers. They won't actually go through a cloud journey where they actually are operating on the cloud. Their primary workloads are on the cloud. But these programs are good, right? We are not saying that that's not a good idea. So having a clear program with a clear deadline to get to where you want to is always a good idea. But when you look at the transformation has to be almost always a product-based thinking. What's fundamentally different? So programs, of course, as we all know, has got an end date. Products have a life cycle. So when products have a life cycle, what we really find is that the products evolve over time, and that life cycle does not have a clear end date that you can pick from the beginning, because it depends on what you're really getting the response from the market to be. So once you actually look at it that way, then you are able to really tap into the advances that we see in the technology from companies like Google, what Bobby is bringing to the table, or any other vendors that you work with, that you can really start tapping into. So you are going to be agile with respect to what your needs are from a business, and then how could you actually marry that up with what the cloud providers are providing. So ultimately, what you have to think about is that when you look at the value, right, it's a very simple question. Does this make your business better? And to do that, is a program going to be good versus a product thinking going to be good? We have seen a lot of cases where companies have had really successful programs where they actually do the migration, but then they find that they are not prepared either through a strategy. I mean, they're starting with their vision, they don't have a clear strategy, and they're not executing properly with respect to how to actually tap into the capabilities that cloud provides. So that's where that product thinking helps.
Yeah, I'll echo that. The idea of putting in what we would refer to as a technical product manager in the role of on your cloud team is a really important thing to do, because once you've established your infrastructure as a service internal cloud platform, that is a living, breathing thing that now your business is relying on. And unless you plan on shuttering your business, which I hope no one is, that is a platform that is going to live in perpetuity, right? And as something that will continue to be evolve and grow and change as your business does, it's a product that needs to be managed. There's a backlog of evolving features that you'll need to be adding to that platform over time that need to be prioritized, right? Taking that product thinking and technical product management approach to your cloud platform is a really, really important strategy, and not running it like Ajay said, as a program that has a definitive end date. This platform does not end. And so that product thinking is an important construct and mindset to have when dealing with your cloud platform.
Bobby, before you chime in, sorry, there's a question from the audience that I think would be good if we can answer in the vein of the topic that we have open. So the question is there any way to start a digital transformation initiative just from purely an IT reason and kind of fit for purpose standpoint, and in doing this, temporarily ignoring the business reasons or the business case behind it?
I'm going to probably give an unpopular answer that I think this has a lot of risk, because I think some of how we've gotten into trouble is thinking about IT versus the business when it's all part of the same organization. So the danger is when you do something purely for IT reasons is I might make the best barbecue in the world and people show up that are vegan to dinner. So you did it right, but you didn't do the right thing. We need to be coordinated with the audience that's showing up to make sure that we are serving them things that are relevant and consumable. Disconnected things may be that we executed it well, but they can't use it.
I'm going to give a perspective that is sort of related to what Bobby said. I 100% agree with Bobby said, right? And this is what we've been saying from the beginning. This has to be a holistic view with respect to what we are really trying to get here. But I'm going to actually pick up on that word that says temporarily ignoring the business needs, right? So if you really look at that, why an IT organization might be looking at doing this might be like, there is a opportunity for business down the road that the IT want to be prepared for to be able to support. If you are in a situation like that, absolutely, you could look at it, because you are saying that the investment or the transformation journey that you're going to start isn't going to yield any results for next 12 months or 18 months. Yes, if your organization as a whole is supportive of that fact because you have a long-term vision and you want to support that, you can do that, but never in isolation. I don't think you will ever have the success by doing in isolation without your product and the finance and the other parts of your organization aligned with you.
Yeah, Ajay, 100% agree with that. And again, for the audience members, if you all are subscribers to the Gartner analyst reports, right? If you may remember a few years back, the concept of the PACE layers was released, right? And categorizing different levels of system, potentially for modernization, right? Systems of record, systems of parity, systems of differentiation, and then systems of innovation or disruption. If you think about that continuum, right? If you look at everything that Ajay and Bobby just talked about and Rick talked about, right? I think that's almost a very good way to kind of bucket these up. But in realizing that all of those different categorizations of systems and how you might modernize to move from one to the other, all of those things touch the business. None of those things are solely IT transformation, because all of those things hopefully lend themselves well as you're moving up that PACE layer concept. All of those things are helping the business ultimately achieve an important outcome, whether it's greater revenue, greater differentiation in the market, better competitive nature, right? So I think to Bobby's point, right, when you're thinking about this path of modernization, of transformation, everything touches the business.
I think let me try to put myself in the shoes of the question person. So I think IT changes, often technical debt, are like replacing windows on the roof on your house. And the business wants granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Now the challenge is I need to replace the windows, but the person that has the money wants granite countertops. Because the business is often funding. So what we have to do is we have to figure out how to mix those things in, and watch this, communicate with the business. If I get you the 4K TV and there's a hole in the roof, it's going to rain on your head while you're watching the Super Bowl. We have to mix those things together. And so we can't circumvent the communication. These things that are behind the wall, upgrading the plumbing, upgrading the electrical, will facilitate the types of things you want to do later. We can't ignore that conversation. We've got to get better at communicating with our counterparts.
Excellent. Wonderful points all around. We're going to move to the next topic here for the sake of time. So around scaling with accelerators, and let's see if the slide will advance. There we go. Scaling with accelerators. Ajay, I'll ask you to speak to this point again. One thing to keep in mind as you all are either thinking about going through or hopefully starting stalled transformation initiatives is, wouldn't it be great if you can move from 0 to 100 instantly, right? That would be awesome. Obviously, that's not the case for many of us, but what if you can start at 25 or 40 or 50? That really helps to spearhead, give you a jump start to get to a place of having a positive inflection point, of having stakeholder buy-in, of securing budget, of producing like an MVP to give people a line in the sand to say, yes, this was either successful or not successful. Yes, I'm willing to further invest to get us to that desired end state. So that said, Ajay, please.
So thank you, Paul, for teeing it up that way, because it is so obvious for any of us when we think about it, right? We are actually going on that journey, but what if something actually gets you, accelerates your journey significantly further? Even if it is 10%, 20%, or whatever that percentage is, anything is far better than 0% where you start from. So that is the number one thing that you have to think about when you think about accelerators. But there's another aspect to it, which is like, is that going to work? So every time you start something from scratch, one of the biggest challenges that organizations have is that really going to work? Now, what if you have a solution, an accelerator that says that this has been proven to work multiple times, at various clients or various places, and it's a sort of guaranteed to work if you use these certain criteria. So those are the two main reasons as to why you really want to have an accelerator. But we talked about scaling from an accelerator's point of view, but we also talked about a few other things, right? The first thing that Paul mentioned was that time to value, right? Could we actually get that value generated faster? Every time we actually start on this journey, this is very complex. This is so disruptive, like we have been talking about, it sort of touches it's so pervasive that it touches every part of your organization whether you know it or not, right? So making sure that that value is realized faster is going to give you that confidence, but also that support that you need from your executives, from the other stakeholders, to make sure that you continue on that journey the right way. That's absolutely that number one thing. Number two, the quality and reliability, right? I mean, this is the other part we talked about. So if it is proven, if it is something that has been done right, and if it is secure, it's built correctly, it's a stable aspect of it, and including things like governance. And we haven't touched upon those things, but if including things like automated governance, if you get a solution, an accelerator that does all of that, from a quality and reliability point of view, that's great. So that's number two. The third one is, of course, the scalability. That's what we wanted to emphasize here. So this is the biggest benefit of going to cloud, right? I mean, we all know that, the pay-as-you-go model was one of the biggest accelerators when COVID hit, for example, and the companies wanted to actually start looking at how do you actually be more sustainable in that business. They started looking at more of pay-as-you-go models. So scalability comes there. So if your business is not doing as much as you wanted to, if your transactions volumes aren't at the level in which you wanted to, how do you actually make sure that your investments aren't actually hurting? So that's where, again, these built-in accelerators can help a lot, right? Because it sort of evolves with the technology. And also going back to some of the platform thinking that Thoughtworks have been putting forth, you might find that these things actually create a lot more self-service options. So this is not something that you would need to have somebody built for you, because it's got self-service options. Ultimately, this makes sure that this whole thing is enabled for you, so that you really don't need to have to learn how to do it, because some of these accelerators would essentially help you with certain reference architectures and provides, it's sort of complying to some of the standards the cloud providers provide. So you don't have to think about like, am I actually being compliant to a particular standard? Because these accelerators lets you do that. So as you can see, I'm really passionate about it. My team here does a lot of work on the accelerators, but this is something that we find that helps your journey significantly.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Ajay, that one of the things I think is really important, we tend to talk a lot about technical debt. And the way that I like to define technical debt is that work that if you ignore makes the creation of future value longer, harder, and more expensive. So if you flip that around, though, on the topic of accelerators, there's tech runway. And if you think about tech runway, it's work that you do now that will make the creation of future value faster, better, and cheaper, right? So it's a really, truly an investment in the work of the future, or leveraging things that have already been built. It's creating economies of scale. It's creating really value multipliers by that investment and reuse of accelerators.
Excellent insight. I love that perspective on both scale, time to value, and making sure that it's very clear the value established is something that resonates with people and is actually a motivating factor to continue further investment and moving your transformation initiative forward. So let's go ahead and pivot to our next and last poll. For those of you who may have poll fatigue at this point, this is the last one. I'll also say that we're going to reserve about 10 minutes at the end of our session here to go ahead and do some Q&A, especially for the questions that are queuing up in the chat and in the Q&A chat as well. So let's talk about this. Where have things slowed down in prior transformation efforts? I imagine there's going to be a pretty good variety here, because there are an awful lot of reasons to start something and then stop something that organizations don't understand, where personal agendas may get in the way, political agendas inside of organizations may get in the way, funding may get cut, people may leave organizations, all kinds of really interesting nuances as to why programs stop midstream. That said, Ajay, what have you seen in your experience dealing with organizations where it seems like no matter what you talk about, what you do, those programs, those initiatives seem to stall and die on the vine, if you will?
Yeah, and I think this is a really practical problem that we see at clients. Everybody starts with high energy, so they know that, hey, this is what we want to do. But eventually what happens is that, or somewhere, along the way, what happens is that your vision or the strategy that we've been talking about comes into play. If you don't have a clear vision and strategy, you're going to get stalled because we know the reason for it, right? Your business conditions change all the time. Your priorities change all the time, because when you start this, huge initiative in the beginning of Q1, that is the number one project, right? That your whole organization is aligned in. But by the time you're in Q2, your business conditions change and you want to do different things. So that becomes a huge deterrent. Then people say, let's take some resources away from that transformation journey, put it into something else that's going to make us money immediately. So again, this ties back into that lack of strategy or lack of a coherent strategy there.
And I would add the importance of that strategy, having defined small chunks of incremental value. That's how you keep the energy high. If every 3 months you're delivering value and you have a mission accomplished moment, keeping that energy high, keeping the investments high, that's what's going to keep your cloud transformation going.
Excellent. Yes, excellent feedback there. So the poll results are in. I will say that the answers that are up here, as far as the percentages, not surprising at all. It's very interesting to see that the leader among why things have slowed down, data discovery, app dependency mapping. In my experience, it usually has a lot to do with assessments requiring too many internal resources, taking too long, access and getting clearances from InfoSec internally, right? All of those things. But actually an incredibly valid reason when app dependency mapping is just something, especially when you have a lot of technical debt, legacy applications where those resources are and how they relate to each other are not abundantly clear, or the tooling that you have internally to do that app discovery and resource mapping is potentially difficult to use, and you potentially have complexities within your environment that prevent use of those tools. So 100% valid reasons. Again, for everybody who's participating on the webinar, please understand you are not alone in this, right? You can see from your fellow participants that you don't have to go through this alone. So hopefully you're in good company, even though that may not make you feel better. All right, moving on very quickly to our next topic. Bobby, if you would lead on this one about the new ways of working in team structures. I think one of the things we all realize to a certain degree that in order to affect change inside of an organization, it's not just changing the way that people do things. It's not just convincing people that other things should be done. There really is an element to cultural change inside of an organization to actually affect and change the way that people think from top to bottom.
Agree. I'm going to give a super short answer, Paul, because I know for the second time we're running up against some other things. So I'll just say this. We need to make sure people know what they'll do in the new world, or they'll be afraid to leave the old world. So they won't leave things behind if they think they're going to get left behind. If I'm on the platform team and the platform is moving to the cloud, where's my job going to be? And so often we hit friction and quicksand because people are fighting for their survival because leadership hasn't painted a picture or a vision of what they're going to do in the new world and how their responsibilities will change. So I think it starts there. Have a clear vision for how your people are going to have room to evolve, learn from their mistakes, and not get left behind as you shift things to other locations and paradigms.
And I would add that while from an application standpoint, lift and shift has gotten a bad name. And I think it's unfair. The actual worst part about lift and shift is lifting and shifting your processes, right? If you don't rethink how you deliver applications and how you use your infrastructure, if you apply the same ways of working that you've had back in your data center days and you apply that to cloud, bad things will happen and FinOps will become very important for you very quickly. If you think about the data center world, those are sunk costs, and your team is actually motivated to maximize the use of those assets because you've already have those sunk costs. So the frequency of which they start to consume those assets is very high. If you take that same thinking over to the cloud, and that's not managed, and you are not thinking about judiciously managing how you're consuming those assets, you're going to have just the opposite intended effect of reducing your operating expenses.
So Rick, very interesting. So while we're on this topic, right, you're really kind of leading into careful change management, right, as the next topic. So let's transition there. But I also want to add to this, right, careful and responsible change management, right? It's not just exercising caution, it's really being good stewards of the resources that you're managing. So Rick, if you would take us through careful change management.
Yeah, I mean, at its most fundamental, and I've got lots of friends in the change management space who will go much deeper than I am, but for me, the most fundamental conversation is we have to start to take cloud and not just think about it as a technology change. It is a people and process change. If you don't take that element with you, you're going to be leaving the people that actually leverage the cloud and create the value for your business and your customers in the dark. So looking at how do I take those people? How do I understand and define what their impact is to them, the WIFM for each individual and each team, and define what that what's in it for me moment for them as they're on this journey. They can either be an engine or an anchor to this transformation. So addressing, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Understanding where their safety is, and creating an environment of psychological safety inside of your organization where they can raise risks, they can raise concerns in a transparent manner, and being very clear that you're taking care of their needs as well as the business's needs and your technology needs. That's a crucial element for careful change management.
I know we are running against time here, so I just want to add 2 quick points to what Rick just said, right? So we have been talking about DevOps as a culture and not as a team, in any kind of digital IT kind of transformational scenarios. So that is hugely relevant here in cloud transformation too, because this is a cultural shift. It's a paradigm shift but that's truly cultural. Even when we talk about things like FinOps, how do we actually allocate the resources that's coming out of your cloud provider? That has to be more of a way in which, the change in the way you're thinking, the way in which you are actually doing things, as opposed to something of an afterthought.
Outstanding. Yes, 100% agreed. +1 to all the commentary. So again, as we're approaching the end of our time together, let's go ahead and transition to our key takeaways. And so Ajay, Rick, and Bobby, if you would kind of give your parting comments around these 3 topic areas or key takeaway areas, the golden nuggets that you want to drop on folks here, that if you didn't hear anything else, these are the 3 things to take away from these 3 expert panelists.
Yeah, I'll start. So for me, it's knowing your why. And one of the reasons why I think that's most important is a cloud transformation journey is a multi-year journey for many organizations. And for good or for bad, for right or for wrong, the speed and frequency of leadership changes in an organization actually is much shorter than the length of a cloud transformation. If you don't understand and know your why and communicate it, and then frequently readdress it as changes in leadership occur and changes in business strategy occur, you're at a really high risk of missing the value that you're supposed to be creating. So knowing your why for me is the key takeaway.
Excellent. I'll say mine is kind of a twofer. I would say embrace outside help and right size expectations. I think that our expectations of cloud are too high and of people are too low. And this is what I mean by that. Cloud is not a savior, it's an amplifier. It will supercharge who you already are. And so we think of cloud like it's going to fix everything that ails us when it's essentially a microphone. If you couldn't sing in the shower, then when I get on the microphone, I'm still going to sing badly. And I'm complaining because the microphone and the amplifier did make me sing better. I may need a voice coach. And so what I think we have to focus on is, are we clear on what we expect to get out of this? If I need to change, right, and I'm going to shift to a gym analogy real quick to land the plane, cloud is not just a gym membership, it's weights at the gym. If you apply good weights, or you apply weight to good form, you're going to get stronger. You apply weight to bad form, you're going to hurt yourself. And this is why most people, at least at first, Paul, need a personal trainer at the gym to help them adjust expectations, right size expectations about what's going to get better and so forth. So embrace help, have realistic expectations, and I would say also communicate with your other partners in the organization.
Thanks, Bobby. And the one I have there is about the accelerators, the one I just spoke about, right? So accelerators, just to reiterate, these are proven techniques. And again, not just code, right? This would include generic reusable code, but not just the coding part of it, proven techniques and strategies and how you actually do this. But whatever that helps you accelerate in your journey, that's what you're really looking for. I might want to actually incorporate a question that came up here. So what are the examples of this, right? one of the easiest way to understand these examples or the example spaces, if you really look at your cloud implementation, the basic infrastructure that is needed for your cloud to be built, whether it's a landing zone or any of your delivery patterns or your CI/CD system, a lot of these things are things that could be reused across different industries, different applications, or even different organizations. There is nothing unique about that with respect to what your verticals are. So those are those kinds of accelerators that you want, because then if you build that infrastructure right, and if you know that it's built right, then applying those applications or putting those applications and using that as a delivery vehicle for you to actually take it through would be phenomenally easier. So using accelerators would be a key win for you.
Thank you all. Massive, massive knowledge drop. I hope everybody in the audience here really feels that this has been time well spent. What we're going to do very quickly, just because we're coming up on the end of our appointed time, we are still going to probably stay a few minutes past the time to do Q&A. But what I would like to do is make sure that if anybody in the audience has feedback or would like to reach out to any member of this panel, that you have that information. And I do believe this is being recorded, and the recording will be provided or watchable from, I believe, the Thoughtworks website. So very quickly, let me just transition so you all have that information, especially if you have to drop to attend your next meetings. Thank you. We appreciate the questions that are coming and the questions that are in the chat as well. We will get to those as quickly as possible and even follow up with some of you offline. But number one, for feedback, QR code on the screen there. Please feel free to take a snap of that and go ahead and leave some feedback for us. We're very appreciative of your participation. We know you have your choice of sessions and webinars, which are crowding your inbox and your LinkedIn feed all day long. So thanks for choosing ours in coming here. So we hope our topics were relevant. And please let us know if you have any feedback on how we could improve these sorts of sessions going forward. Last thing here is, again, if you wanted to reach out to any of the panelists, here's our contact information. And just a quick aside for Bobby's analogy around, proper etiquette at the gym. Most of you may not know, but Bobby's in great physical shape. So believe that what he said is the truth around that particular topic. Strong at a lot of things, that guy. So anyways, thank you all very, very much. If you have to drop, we understand. And again, thank you so much for spending an hour with us on a Tuesday afternoon. Very good. So at this time, let's go to actually do some Q&A. We'll, like I said, we'll stay just a couple of minutes past to answer kind of the burning questions here in the chats. So I think there was a very good question here around, I'm just looking back through. Okay, so yes, this is around, Bobby, your great analogy about technical debt and a leaking roof. How do you measure technical debt and manage it in an objective manner rather than a subjective manner, which, as we all know, with technical debt,
Yeah.
a lot of it has to do with personal agendas and how those things are viewed to influence behavior and action.
Right. Yeah, this is, I think Vinod had to drop, so hopefully we'll be able to follow up with him offline. But Vinod, if you're able to listen to the recording, I think there are a couple things to think about. This is a really long tail topic, and I'm going to do a poor job of trying to answer it quickly. But I think one of the things we have to think about is when we look at technical debt, is this a maintenance issue or an improvement issue? Is this something where I've got to fix it just because our business depends on it and it's broken, or it's something that's a little old or stale? I've said in other formats, everything new isn't good and everything old isn't bad. I've got an air conditioning and furnace unit in one of my properties that's like 26 years old. And every time the HVAC people come and check it out, they're like, has that thing died yet? And it hasn't. Sometimes there are things that are old that are still getting the job done, right? And there are other things that are old that are broken that need to be remediated. And so I would say, is it a repair thing or an improvement thing? And then when you look at that application or that system, is this something that I intend to retire? Is this something that I hope to reimagine, or is this something that just needs to run better? So that's how I start to kind of put together a framework, and that'll help you understand what level of investment you're going to make. How to measure technical debt is a whole different thing, because there's so many different people to get into that. We need to probably bring architects into play. Again, what is the value we want to get out of the application now and later? So again, we'll have to take more of that offline, but that's my framework to start to look at technical debt.
Outstanding. Yeah. Let's answer or attempt to answer one more question here. And this is about application dependency mapping. So in our experience, which are the best tools to support app dependency mapping? So I'll start here very quickly. I would say there are a number of good tools out there. My experience has been it usually requires a combination of tools. This is not one tool to get the job done, especially if the complexity of your environment includes things like extended networks, network segmentation, account isolation, account boundaries for risk management and security purposes. Like each of those different permutations of how your client environment or how your organizational environment is configured influence the ability of those tools to actually do what they're supposed to do. There's also the aspect, I think, the rise in recent years and the refocusing upon on InfoSec and making sure that your CISOs and your CSOs in your organization actually have a good handle on what's happening in those environments. And then things like promiscuous network discovery being bounded appropriately. Many times exercising dependency mapping and network scanning has a lot to do with making sure it's cleared by InfoSec first, which means that your time frame for getting those things done can be greatly increased just because of the amount of scrutiny that those tools typically have to go under if they are not already approved tools in the tool chain and framework ecosystem within your environment. So I'll stop there. That didn't talk about any one specific tool. There's arguably really good lists out there of tools to combine to get the job done, depending on workload and network complexity and organizational complexity. But that would be kind of my general guidance there is those few things I talked about. It has a lot to do with the impact of time frame and being able to do app dependency mapping and workload discovery inside an internal network.
Yeah, and I would echo, as a professional services company, we tend to not endorse any one particular tool. We really look at our clients to do some fit for purpose. We're happy to participate in those conversations. But once the client has landed on what tool is the best fit for purpose for them, whether or not they've used our inputs or not, then we come in and we start to work and help you through that application deconstruction and refactoring. But there's lots of open source tools out there, lots of commercial tools. You can Google it. Gartner has got a good feedback on their quadrants around the tools in that space. So I would go and start there as well.
I'll just plus one to that. There's not one ring to rule them all. This is not Lord of the Rings. There's not one tool that does all of these things well. And when you look at applications holistically being not just one piece, right? It's the storage, it's the database, it's the application, it's the networking, it's the policies. No one tool does all those things well. So to Paul's point and to Rick's point, you're going to have to look at several different things, but also make sure you're clear on what your expectations are. Are you trying to look for infrastructure dependencies, application dependencies, dependencies between systems of applications or composite applications? Again, try to talk about what your expectations are up front so we can be clear.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you everybody again for joining. We appreciate again all the participants who were able to make time and stay a few minutes after the appointed time. Thank you very much. Thank you again to our expert and illustrious panelists, Rick, Ajay, Bobby. Thank you for taking time to carve out of your very busy schedules to come and talk to a bunch of folks about topics I know you all are individually and collectively passionate about. So thank you very much. Anybody who's interested in having this conversation or conversation further, please reach out to us. We are, like I said, all very passionate about having these conversations. I believe we come with an informed and differentiated perspective. So please reach out to Thoughtworks if you have any questions about any of these topics. And please reach out to Bobby if you feel like you need to have a therapy session about the woes of your cloud journey. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.